Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm really coffee drinking with you. That sounded good.
Okay,
Not much.
Hi, Scott, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, do you want people to leave their audio off?
I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay. Okay, well, do you guys prefer to leave, do you want me to have it muted, or do you want me to leave the audio on?
Well,
So they can hear you.
We can switch it back and forth.
Yeah.
Unless you're gonna talk about the rest of us, but
Okay.
that's up to you. Okay, we're getting everybody loaded in here as best we can. So hang on one second, everybody. Councilmember Cathcart. We have a quorum.
Well, very good.
And
All
we
right.
will continue to watch for latecomers here, but you're free to start the meeting.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Oh, my agenda just disappeared. Hold on.
I can fix it.
All right, thank you.
This one?
I put mine away thinking it was on the screen. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. We will call our January 29th Steering Committee of Elected Officials meeting to order. Let's see, our first, do we need to go through and do roll call?
No, we're watching that and we have a quorum on screen right now.
Okay, very good. And I just saw Kitty texted something if somebody wants to check on that. Okay, well, let's start with our minutes. Can we get a motion to approve the November 13, 2024 minutes?
Ron Higgins, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, very good.
I'm sorry, who is the second, please?
I was one of them, Kitty.
Okay. You win.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendments? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Minutes are approved. We'll move on to our public hearing, affordable housing, or our affordable housing countywide planning policies. And we're gonna open with public testimony, or are we gonna have a presentation to start?
We've got a quick update for you.
Great.
And we're gonna turn this over to Tate Andre on the county planning staff.
Perfect. Take it away.
Good morning, steering committee. We have a few items in this presentation, but yeah, I'll be starting with the CPP update. Just to go over the process, this was deferred in 2022 because of the anticipated housing legislation, and the amendments here now reflect those requirements. Throughout the process, we received feedback from the PTAC, you all in the steering committee, stakeholder groups, and the general public. These were produced starting in May up until now. At the last November meeting, it was decided by the steering committee that the use of should and may required further deliberation because of the legal definitions. And so in December, the steering committee, the CPP subcommittee of the steering committee deliberated on the use of should and may. And so draft version 5 was written based off of that feedback and posted on January 14th. Next slide, please. Mr. Chesney, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm sorry.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Awesome, thank you. So to summarize the changes made, we ended up keeping all the may language when referring to strategies and should language and all other cases. This is because should language indicates a recommendation and allows the policy to be more meaningful while still being discretionary. On the other hand, keeping may language for strategies provides examples that jurisdictions could use when accomplishing said policy, but this acknowledges that the jurisdiction's desire or ability to use the example or to use the strategies differs based on various factors. Additionally, the strategies here are not limiting, so any jurisdiction can accomplish the policy through whatever means they desire. And so with that, PTAC recommends that the steering committee approve and recommend these for adoption to the Board of County Commissioners with consideration of the latest amendments. That is all I have for you, but I'm happy to take any questions as well.
Mr. Chairman, you're free to open the public hearing.
Very good. Are there any quick questions from anybody on the steering committee first? Not seeing any. Okay, why don't we open it up for public testimony? And I don't know, can I see if they've got their hand up here?
Let's see, we're watching from here.
Okay. So I'm looking for any hands. I'm not seeing any.
Nor are we.
Okay, so we'll say going once. Still not seeing any hands. Going twice.
Chairman Cathcart, I believe we have 2 hands up. Linnell Hott was first.
Okay, very good. Linnell, why don't you take it away?
Make sure we can get them here. Hang on 1 second, please. Linnell, you're available. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for this reconsideration. I really appreciate it, as do many of my cohorts.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Linnell. And I heard there's one other hand. I'm not
Paul
seeing
Kropp.
on my end.
Paul Kropp. Paul, you're on.
Take it away.
Thank you. I just want to echo the thanks to the PTAC and the subcommittee members for taking this under careful consideration and producing this result. I appreciate it very much. That's all I got.
Here's Commissioner Waldorf is joining us.
Welcome, Commissioner Waldorf. Okay, not seeing any further hands. Going once, going twice.
Hold
And
on. One, okay, Commissioner Waldriff, did you mean to speak?
My apologies. My computer was very slow this morning, so I was just letting you know I was here to be promoted to a panelist, so thank you.
welcome. All right. Well, I think we have done our due diligence. I'm not seeing any further commentary from the public. So with that, we can turn it back over to the steering committee and consider the action on this item. With that, is there a motion from anybody to adopt the recommended countywide planning policies?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second.
I
Is there,
missed the second. I'm sorry, Mr.
I
Chairman.
think it was Councilmember Dillon.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any discussion from the steering committee? I am not seeing any. Okay, with no discussion, we will go to the vote.
Oh,
All,
Mr.
Oh.
Chair,
yes, please.
I just wanted to thank everyone for their work on this and I don't know if she's on here. Our wonderful Liberty Lake mayor for being on the subcommittee with me, but we worked really hard on it. So thank you for letting us do that and bring it back to you.
Very good. Okay, can we get a motion to adopt the
I
recommendation?
apologize. Did I say, I meant Medical Lake. Did I say Liberty Lake?
Oh,
Oh.
Sorry, I was giving you credit, Chris. I was giving you credit, but that's okay.
And FYI, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Medical Lake is Mayor Cooper is being represented by proxy today.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
yes. But I'll pass along the message, so.
Is there a motion from the steering committee?
We have a motion and a second on the floor.
Oh yeah, that's correct. Is there any further discussion? Sorry. Hearing none. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. And we'll move into the climate update. Who are we turning that over to?
We're on it. Mr. Chairman, hang on. Graham Zickafoos from County Planning Staff will lead you through this discussion.
All right. Thank you, Scott. So this is just to give everybody a sort of brief update. We brought this before the SCEO back in November, and a lot of the process summary there was presented at the at that last meeting. However, since the last steering committee meeting, we included comments from the tribe and Spokane County Public Works into the most recent draft of the climate countywide planning policies. And then we also included some minor feedback from the PTAC Climate Subcommittee. The next steps for the climate and resiliency countywide planning policies will just be to revise based on any feedback that the steering committee has today. And then we will again bring this before the steering committee on the March 19th meeting for public hearing and potential adoption. So that's just kind of the brief update that we have for, or that PTAC has for the climate and resiliency countywide planning policies.
Very good. Is the draft that's on the website, is that the most current draft?
It should be, yes.
Very good. Are there any questions? And I'm not seeing here, so if somebody else can see if any hands are raised.
I'm not seeing any here or in the audience.
It looks like Commissioner Waldriff has
Here we go.
her hand up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, could you put that slide just back up again?
Yes.
it was quick. Okay, great, great. I was just seeing the, so I guess I just wanted to follow up on the subcommittee. How many members do you have? And are you still accepting members to the climate change resiliency subcommittee?
It is, let me see here. It's made up of PTAC members. I believe we have 7 or 8 members of PTAC in the climate subcommittee.
And then isn't there a citizen committee that you've put together with different experts and interested parties? Where do they fit into this process?
So I believe you may be talking about the Climate Policy Technical Advisory Committee, and that is something that is just advising the county on our own climate change and resiliency element as a part of the 2026 comprehensive plan. So it's
Commissioner, to add to that though, as these countywide planning policies are being drafted, we will introduce that to the TAC as well. So they've got a way of commenting on those as they become policies recommending to the steering committee and to the board.
Oh, okay, so each jurisdiction can choose to have like advisors or input into their input into the big, I'm trying to understand the process.
The technical advisory committees are generally volunteers from the community that have a particular interest or subject matter experts in that particular topic. The representation from municipalities is generally through PTAC, or if as these drafts are ready for the steering committee, if the steering committee itself wanted to form a subcommittee of elected officials, we would help facilitate that.
So where is the TAC in this process summary?
The TAC has been operating on a parallel track right now, mostly on looking at the climate resiliency element of the GMA plan as it relates to the county as a whole. And what we would be waiting to do is, if this current draft is generally getting a nod from the steering committee, we will bring that to the next TAC meeting as an introduction or as an element for their consideration. They are simply a recommending body, though. They will not be making a recommendation directly to you. However, in representing them to the county, we will bring their information back to the PTAC and to you.
So they've had an input into the draft. I'm just trying to understand.
They have not had connection to the countywide planning policies yet. They have been focused on the GMA element on climate and resiliency.
Okay, more of the nuts and bolts of like,
yes,
how much emissions we have in our county.
Yes.
What's reasonable, where are they emitted from, et cetera. What are ways to measure it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Heather has her hand up, I see.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. Commissioner Waldorf, I'm Heather Troutman with the City of Airway Heights. I'm also part of the PT.
Oh. Did we lose Heather?
I think we lost you, Heather.
Oh, no, you just were moving me from a panel into the panel. Thank you very much.
There we go.
Airway Heights. We are part of the PTAC and also been participating on the subcommittee for climate resiliency. It's a great question with regards to this. So the county planning policy's purpose is for each agency, as they develop their own required climate resiliency, to identify the goal or the target that we're trying to meet. So for example, not only does the county have its own policy advisory committee, Airway Heights has its own policy advisory committee, because we'll be drafting an element with strategies specific to each community. So the higher purpose of the recommendation today are the 60,000-foot target that each agency is working toward for consistency across the county with their climate plans. So just to echo Scott, within the county's own development of its comprehensive plan element, you're utilizing an advisory committee, which will be looking toward this policy as a countywide goal to ensure consistency moving forward. No different than our own citizen and policy advisory committee will be looking at our draft chapter, looking at these recommended goals and policies to ensure compliance as we move forward with the plan. So hopefully that provides some clarity on how each agency is developing their own chapter and the purpose of the recommendation today.
Okay, any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any hands.
None in the audience, Mr. Chairman. Oh, wait, Paul Crop just put his hand up.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
So what role does the Regional Planning Agency, SRTC, have in this greenhouse gas emission target setting or evaluation thereof?
SRT,
It's cited,
SRT, sorry.
it's cited in the draft, but if it would be possible to elaborate a bit on what the role of the RTPO or MPO is here in Spokane County with regard to these standards.
Oh, that is a good point, and we can certainly clarify the role of SRTC in a future draft. SRTC does have a representative as a part of the PTAC subcommittee, so that's certainly someone that we can talk to as we move forward. Heather, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. So not only is SRT represented on the PTAC for this discussion, but they've also been invited to participate in many of the agency's own policy advisory committees. But the specific role is that SRTC received a grant to establish vehicle mile travel targets for the county. That work will be completed in 2025, and that would be a recommendation moving forward to each agency as we work on our greenhouse gas emission and vehicle mile traveled portion of our comprehensive plan elements moving forward to incorporate those targets and again, look toward consistency. And I just want to note really quickly that because of the size and the variety of communities within Spokane County, not all of the agencies within Spokane County are required to meet the greenhouse gas emission requirement. So one of the elements, as you've seen in the draft here, is kind of identifying that these goals and policies that are recommended before you today are sized to fit those communities with the varying requirements under this act.
Okay.
Yes. I think Paul Crop has his hand up again.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, thank you. Just to continue on this, I just have to say, I'm not sure that the word coordinate policy 1.2 with the RTPO is actually reflects exactly what Heather Troutman just described.
Paul will take that under advisement. As always, we appreciate your sharp eyes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else from the steering committee or the public? I am not seeing anything. Okay.
Nothing in the public.
We will move on. I think next up is our land quantity, land capacity updates. And who is going to take the lead on this?
That will also be me.
Very good. Take it away.
All right. Scott, could you please change to the next slide?
Working on it. It seems to be a little, there we go.
Oh, there it is. Yep. So this will just be a update on the county LCA as well as on some of the other jurisdictions. I do want to stress that all the numbers that we are sharing right now, none of them are final, including the ones for the other jurisdictions. Everything you will see here is preliminary. The goal is mainly to just give the steering committee an idea of progress and capacity within the UGA as a whole so far. As you all know, the LCA is an exercise meant to gauge whether jurisdictions have capacity to take on projected incoming population growth over 20 years with the available land as it is currently zoned. One thing that you'll see before we go there, you'll see on the next slide is how these numbers for Spokane County compare to the population allocation that we received. And these are just, this includes all of the cities, the different jurisdictions numbers that we have so far. But Scott, could you please just go back to the previous slide very quickly? So the in short, the story that these numbers tell is that the unincorporated UGAs, which are just the UGA outside of any municipality, do not have enough capacity for our population allocation, which is right around 30,500. Right now, we're seeing that we have capacity for closer to 24,000, a little over that. And you can see the breakdown of the vacant land, partially used land, platted land, and sort of how that's converted into dwelling unit capacity. On that other column, you can see some of the assumptions that we made in determining capacity, the dwelling units per acre, the population per household, as well as our market factor. So if you I can just give everybody a couple seconds to just kind of take some of that in, and then just note any questions that you have on any of this for the end. And we can probably move on to the next slide there, which just shows progress on so these are just regional LCA results, again, preliminary for many of the jurisdictions in Spokane County. Airway Heights and Spokane Valley do not have numbers ready to share yet, but will be ready to share numbers at the next steering committee meeting in March. And then just a couple of clarifying things about this graph. You'll see that we have two columns labeled dwelling units and population, 2023 to 2046. Those are the capacities for jurisdictions. And then the two columns next to it with housing allocation and population allocation, those are what we are allocated by Commerce's HAPT tool, which allocates housing units. And then the population allocation comes from the OFM medium projections, which were approved to be used as our population allocations by the Board of County Commissioners early in 2024. So in short, the capacity, the allocation is what we measure our capacity against, or we measure these against one another to determine whether or not we have capacity to take on the growth that is allocated to us in terms of both population and housing. And now I believe that there are sorry, somebody. I believe there are a few jurisdictions that have representatives on this meeting that are going to share a little bit about their jurisdictions' LCA preliminary LCA results in particular. And so I'll turn it over to those jurisdictions.
Okay, Who will be first up?
Hi, this is Tate real quick. The jurisdictions I were told that wanted to present was Mayor of Millwood, Kevin Freeman, and Justin Bearlocker from Deer Park. So we can start with Mayor Freeman if that works for you.
And I think City of Spokane has at least some preliminary, if I'm not incorrect on that. But yeah, let's start with
Yes.
Millwood.
So thank you very much, Kevin Freeman, Mayor, City of Millwood. And I will be brief. Our land capacity analysis was completed by Amanda Tanio of Upward 7 Consulting. And just to be a few points, our household average population is about 2.44 persons per household, in line, I think, with the county. We've determined that we have adequate capacity within our current city boundaries to accommodate, or without expanding anything, to accommodate our allocation of 49 individual persons, which is 0.05% of the Spokane County population. We need to plan for about 106 additional housing units across all the income bands. We do have to, our main issue with all of this HAP work is how Millwood is going to look at developing our requirements for permanent supportive housing and temporary emergency housing units, because we need to look at how we're going to, or how we would either work with a surrounding jurisdictions for these temporary emergency housing units, or in what manner we would attempt to accommodate these, because it looks like we need about 2 to 5 temporary emergency housing units. And I think, as most people know or may understand, we don't have infrastructure existing in the city of Millwood that would be conducive to use as temporary emergency housing units. We have no hotels, motels, anything like that, and not any sort of community services or that type of infrastructure. We will have to, the city will have to look at some code amendments to comply with the state legislation for ADUs and for the HAP. So we will have to examine some of those options for getting done what we need to get done. We can probably accommodate some of mixed use development in our C2. But we will have to look at some zoning changes in our residential. We only have 3 residential zones, and we will probably have to look at some zoning changes in at least 2 of those to facilitate housing development across all bands. That's pretty much all I have. Are there any questions from the county or anyone else?
Any questions? I'm not seeing.
Nothing from the public audience.
Very good.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Who is next?
Justin,
Justin.
Deer Park.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please take it away.
Okay, perfect. I'm Justin Bearlocker. I'm with JEB Engineers. And we're assisting Deer Park in their comp plan update. We've gone through a preliminary review of the land capacity analysis using the same metrics that Graham has been using. We did use a 2.4 household size as well. And it looks like we'll be able to meet in the preliminary review, meet the 20-year population allocation within the city. We still need to do some, a few more refinements to the analysis and make sure all the properties are accounted for. And we'll be doing that with the city in the near future. And then also our next step is review the housing allocation and making sure that we're meeting that metric as well.
Very good. Any questions for Deer Park? For Justin? I'm not seeing any.
None from the public.
All right,
Very
thank
good.
you.
All right, well, let's turn it over to Kevin and we'll do the update from the city of Spokane.
Yeah, thank you, council member. I don't really have much of a presentation today. I just where I am here if there were any questions. I believe the intention is that in March we would give a very short presentation giving some summary results, but the dwelling units population are shown here. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I would love to just better understand maybe from Deer Park and then Spokane County, just how the underutilized is or isn't factored in.
Yeah, so I can speak to Spokane County in terms of our underutilized land. So underutilized land was something that we looked into very early on, and it's essentially what underutilized land is and how it differs from partially used land. So partially used just because the two often get conflated and mixed up. So partially used land is where you have a sort of oversized parcel, or it's at its very basic, it is a parcel that has a existing unit, but is large enough to include more existing units on it. So that is partially used. Underutilized land is any land where the structure that exists on the land, no matter how big that land is not the densest possible use. So an example of this would be a lot that has a single family home on it, but the land that it's built on is zoned for medium density or high density residential. That's, the most common example. So when we were looking for underutilized land, that's what we were looking for. And what we found was that in the county, in the unincorporated county, there were something like 370 parcels initially that met the criteria for underutilized land. These were largely single family homes that were built in MDR or HDR zoned land. However, the reason that you don't see those reflected here is because about 80% of those, which was I think 305 of the 370 parcels, were in established single family home subdivisions that both satellite aerial imagery and just historic development did not reflect that those would change. That left about 65 parcels remaining that could also be considered underutilized, but at that point, 65 out of 23,000 parcels to be evaluated as a part of our LCA barely comes to a rounding error. And so the underutilized land we made the determination was not something that was consequential to our land capacity analysis.
So if I understand the process correctly, each jurisdiction sort of makes their own determination on that, correct? And so just from your perspective, I'd love to better understand when you said that they would not change. And so, but is there a difference between would not and could not in terms of this?
There is. And I think that there's there is a certain amount of jurisdiction by jurisdiction interpretation of how these things may occur. And so that was the decision that we've made as to right now about underutilized land, just
Understood.
based on what we've seen.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
kind of weigh in on that briefly. You will see all of the assumptions we make in the final report, or even in a draft staff report that's available. That any of the members can look at. Graham has been sharing this with PTAC, so it's been discussed at that level as well. And that's kind of the reminder for everybody else that yes, you made the comment, all of the jurisdictions are doing their own analysis and making their own assumptions. Those will come before the steering committee for your evaluation and also for the county, as we've said before, checking their work. We will go through the assumptions and ask questions about their veracity as we put this together, because ultimately, as the steering committee knows, your recommendation becomes a county board action.
Very good. Mayor Freeman?
Yes, and that was to Commissioner Cathcart's point. That's kind of what I was referring to in discussing zoning changes. We have about almost 4 acres of what we would consider to be underutilized land. Millwood has historically a lot of large lot, single family that we have some zoning and frontages and et cetera that we could address by allowing individuals to subdivide, short plat, things like that, or other zoning changes in order to get the units we need. But we could come up on that underutilized land that has in Millwood, under our analysis, that has a capacity of about 53 units. So those sorts of changes, do my residents want to consider those changes? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're looking at underutilized and ways that we could develop or put lots to higher and better use or more productive use for the zoning, then yes, we'd have to make some zoning changes in Millwood to get that going.
Very good. Are there other questions, comments regarding the 3 we heard from?
I'm not seeing any hands in the public sector.
Okay.
Nope,
Well, very
there's
good.
one. I'm sorry, just a second.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm just having trouble understanding the spreadsheet and how to understand or read it. So can you help me understand, like, for instance, City of Spokane dwelling units and population on the left, and then the housing allocation and population on the right? How do those interrelate?
So the 2 that you see on the left, so that 33,000 figure and that 69,000 figure for the city of Spokane, those are what the city of Spokane has up until now, barring further evaluation, has determined is what the city has capacity for in terms of dwelling units and in terms of population in those dwelling units. And then the columns on the right show, firstly, with the housing allocation, the number of units determined by the Department of Commerce's HAPT tool. That 22,300 figure is what the city of Spokane would need to build in order to get up to capacity. And then that 23,000 figure is what, according to the OFM medium population projections, how many people city of Spokane would need to have room for. So essentially the story that's telling is based on the numbers that they have right now, they have more than enough capacity for what they're allocated.
In current housing or in estimated future housing?
In estimated future housing. So the land capacity analysis is an exercise in looking at vacant, partially used, underutilized, and platted land. Essentially anything that has it's unbuilt. And saying, okay, if all of that was built up with the zoning as it currently exists, what would be our capacity? And
recall, Kevin Frybot is here from the city who may be able to answer, more directly.
I'm just, I wasn't picking on the city's numbers. I was just trying to understand, but I'm guessing the upzoning throughout the city, right? The being able to build on any lot, right, more than a single family home really impacts the numbers greatly, right?
So our final report isn't published, but it will have all these details in it, just to kind of echo what Scott said about the county's report. So when it comes to our recent housing changes, or what are colloquially known as BOCA or BOH, we did not apply a bonus factor because of BOCA or BOH. It hasn't been around long enough for us to know what the effect is. These numbers that you see are based on a lot of different assumptions, but when it comes to like low intensity residential, single family, 2, 3s, we assumed that those areas would build pretty much how they're building now. And so if we're looking at an area like North Indian Trail where our densities are much lower, we assumed they would continue to be lower. The only place where we had sufficient data to kind of not elevate, but to factor in some of the recent changes was ADUs. Our ADU permitting has skyrocketed partially because of some of the changes we've made, but we had much better data and longer data on ADUs, so we use that. But when it comes to BOCA or a BOCA factor, which is what I've heard before, we did not apply an overall BOCA factor to this number. You can see here on this table that it lists acreage. Just because it says NA, that's because I don't have those numbers published yet. We do know the acres of vacant, partially used, and platted. And to give you an idea, we have about 3 times as much acreage identified as possible capacity, and we have about 3 times as much than the county's number. For the UGA, we have about 3 times the capacity than the county's UGA. So we're actually in line. It is a matter of we just have a lot of land that's still available. And that's why the numbers are what they are. I hope that helps.
Yeah, were you able to do any kind of calculation for like the East Central area along the freeway where there's vacant property, right? Or the division corridor, which technically you could develop higher density today, but it's probably not going to happen until changes are made to the, over time to the division corridor, with the north-south corridor being complete. So I was just wondering if you factored in anything around future development on those 2 corridors, kind of the I-90 and the division.
Where along I-90, WSDOT has purchased a number of properties and vacated them into right-of-way. Those are not capacity. Those are state land. And so that kind of the WSDOT effect along that corridor definitely was factored in, and it was factored in a way that it reduced our overall capacity. More of what I think you're talking about is like east of Division and south of Sprague, where a lot of the properties are underutilized. They are single family homes in multifamily areas. And we have kept in the report, you'll see that we've kept our vacancy or our land classes, the amounts of those 3 classes of land and the capacity represented by those. I've kept those separate because the underutilized, naturally there's some questions around underutilized. Those acres are part of our capacity. They are listed in the report as underutilized. Where I would like to have been able to do a detailed analysis such as Graham did, we have 10 times as many underutilized parcels. There just wasn't sufficient data or time to do that. We hope to do that soon. I can say, though, that if I was to remove all of the underutilized capacity in the report from the city of Spokane, we still have sufficient capacity. So we're not it could be said that we're not relying on that number to meet our capacity numbers.
Thank you. I was just curious. Thank you.
And Kevin, you're going to get in a little more detail in March, correct?
Correct. I would like to come back and provide just a few slides of kind of the amounts of areas and some of the assumptions that we applied. I will say, when we talk about potential future capacity, it's easy to because we're just showing you one number. It's easy to think of this as like, oh, we just assumed everything built out completely. In reality, we took out so much of the available land due to many, many different factors. For example, our vacant land, about a quarter of all vacant land in the city was removed from capacity for one reason or another. Physical impediments was needed for other purposes, or we knew that that property wasn't going to build. So keep in mind when you see these numbers that there was already a lot taken out. We've been incredibly conservative throughout this analysis to try to be as realistic as possible. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, this is an academic process. This is not perfect. This is what we need to do at the beginning in order to have those greater conversations later on about comprehensive planning.
Very good. I'm not seeing any other hands from the steering committee. Is there anybody in the public?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are 3 members of the public. Jim Frank was first, then Paul Kropp, and then Jennifer Thomas.
Very good. Okay, Jim, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. I've been in the house building business for 40 years, and the last 10 years or so I've been spending a lot of time in the West Central neighborhood and working with nonprofit housing developers and working with small developers looking to find the opportunity to build houses in infill neighborhoods like West Central. And there is obviously a big disconnect between the actual market land that is actually available for affordable housing to be constructed on and these theoretical numbers. So there may be theoretical capacity that's being developed by these numbers, but it is not reflecting in any way actual market availability. The land prices in West Central in the last 7 years have gone from maybe $20,000 or $30,000 a lot to nearly $200,000 a lot. That is the current price to find a vacant parcel in the West Central neighborhood, $200,000. And that eliminates the opportunity to do any housing, much less affordable housing. And the West Central is one of the neighborhoods that's been identified as having a large capacity of underutilized land because West Central, about 1/3 of West Central is zoned high density residential, but it's an existing fully developed single family neighborhood with single family houses. And the idea that those houses would be torn down and replaced with apartments is not going to happen economically, but the displacement of that low income housing and being replaced with high priced apartment housing is very inconsistent with not only the desires of that neighborhood, but even the policies that exist in the displacement of families. So it's honestly a terrible policy to think that we're going to tear down existing single family houses and replace them with multifamily. I've done a survey. I drove the entire 80 block area in West Central that's identified that has high density housing and with single family houses. And out of approximately 800 houses, 3 of them in the last 20 years have a new multifamily development on them where a single family house existed before, 3 out of 800. So this isn't real capacity. I think you need to understand that if you don't provide actual real capacity for nonprofits and small builders and market rate builders to build houses on, that they simply will go to North Idaho, because North Idaho has 30,000 acres of flat developable land that's available, and that is already happening. So I really urge that you be careful about these land capacity analysis, because there is a consequence to it. And land is currently not available for development. And the idea that you could build 33,000 dwelling units in the city of Spokane over the next 10 years is a fallacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Next up was Paul.
Well, I always appreciate Mr. Frank's observations tending toward reality. My comment would be to have a similar discussion about the unincorporated area, the incorporated area, the unincorporated area of Spokane County, the top line there. What is that telling us, if anything? There's a big discrepancy in the pink and the yellow columns. What's the discussion there?
Is there a response to that, or we want to get back to Paul?
Paul, are you asking about the difference between the dwelling unit capacity and the allocated housing unit number, for example?
Well, the city can say that it can accommodate, in theory, given the way this all is working, what's being it's being projected that it should be. And I'm interested in the same conversation for the county, where there is a big difference between the numbers in each column.
Okay. What I would direct you to and others is our own analysis and staff report that Graham's been working on. But essentially the preliminary answer is, given the development patterns we've seen, the densities that are allowed and projected, like the city was doing, we're projecting those at developing at roughly the same densities as before for this analysis. And that's showing that we are, in fact, going to be out of available property in the unincorporated UGA polygons for the 20 to 46 number, that we will need to grow that. As you probably also know, though, there's going to be an aggregate to this at the end, because we'll be creating a recommendation for a single UGA number or a single growth number as this goes on. But at the moment, we're showing that there is a deficit in available land for the unincorporated county.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jim has his hand up. Oh, no, I'm sorry, took it down. And it looks like Jennifer has taken her hand down.
No, I still would like to speak.
Oh, all right.
Go ahead.
I just was unmuted, and then the Zoom automatically lowered my hand. But I guess my question is more specifically for Kevin Freebot, and I know that the city is still putting together their final numbers, but and it's a two-part question. I would love to understand better what if the limitations across the city were considered, for example, in Latah Valley, where there's some significant issues of transportation, I-90, fire safety, and how many more units are being slated for the Latah Valley area, and what is the plan to accommodate that as far as creating other avenues in and out when it comes to fire specifically. And then also I know that you talked about if you took out all of the underdeveloped land capacity, that you would still have enough space. But what do your preliminary numbers show as far as redevelopment that's going to be necessary within the city of Spokane?
Who's that directed to, Jennifer?
To Kevin Freebot.
Kevin, do you have a response?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the number of units in Latah, I don't have that readily available. We didn't, it's not yet broken down by any kind of sub area or anything like that. And there are a number of vacant properties down there, of course. There is significant area that we know development is being prepared for. So obviously there is quite a few units down there. That isn't to say that we didn't apply a lot of limitations. Anytime we had physical impediments or any kind of jurisdictional impediment, we tried to accommodate that in the analysis. But one thing to keep in mind with this, and I think this, I had my hand up for this reason before too, is that there are things that this analysis does, and there are things it cannot do. And so it's worth going back, I think it was 6 months or 6 meetings ago when I introduced the LCA to everybody as part of the PTAC discussion. And that was, what is the purpose of the LCA? The purpose of the LCA is not to be a perfect site-by-site analysis of every potential developable site in the city or in the jurisdictions. It's just not possible. We could have somebody spend all year just doing that and never do anything else. It's an academic exercise to answer a question. And that question is, do we have physical space to accommodate the growth that we are required under GMA to plan for? Does that mean that it will build? Not necessarily. Does that mean it has to build? Not necessarily. The city does. Cities don't control who builds and when. So keep in mind that this is the beginning of a conversation. This is the beginning of a process that ends with the engrossing, comprehensive planning process that we all have to undertake. That said, when it comes to Latah, we're keenly aware of the infrastructure concerns down there. We're keenly aware of the transportation concerns. But I also remind everyone that this is a 20-year horizon. It's not tomorrow. It is within 20 years is that growth that we are aiming for. Do we anticipate that no growth will ever happen in Latah Valley? No. There is already processes underway, projects underway to help resolve the issues down there to see what we can, if we need to adjust. But the LCA is looking at really what's physically possible, what's allowed right now in our current zoning. So Latah is a big discussion point. We're looking at it. I hope that answers your question on that, Jennifer. And then as far as showing redevelopment first versus, new greenfield development, that's where the land classes come together. Vacant land, that's development. These lands don't have anything on them so that they don't need to be redeveloped. But when you're looking at partially used or underutilized, if there's a use there and worth saying it could potentially be something greater, that's redevelopment. If it's partially used, in some cases, we expect it to completely redevelop. However, in our analysis, anytime we had a partial use, so say you have a house on a very large parcel, or you have a commercial use in the corner of a very large parcel, and we wanted to say, how many units could this hold? We went ahead and assumed that existing use stays. That's not required. That's a step we took in order to be more conservative. So for the city of Spokane, at least, vacant and partially used is what we would call new development. So partially used, that use will stay. Underutilized, we assumed redevelopment in that. So hopefully that's answering your question, Jennifer.
Yes, it created a follow-up question or a secondary question then also.
Always does.
So when you talk about it being an academic exercise versus a likelihood to be developed, or what is physically possible versus what's likely to be developed, are you and the city currently is counting what is physically available, physically possible? Where will that discrepancy between what's physically available and what's likely to be developed, where will that be addressed?
That discussion is kind of the next steps for this, and I can only speak for the city of Spokane. I don't know the work plan for everyone else. So for the city of Spokane, our environmental impact statement for the comp plan is, for the previous comp plan, is 20 years old. It's time to do a new one. We are going through a full process of analyzing various alternatives for land use and policy for the city, including what potential development we might see from that within the next 20 years. So it's like we're at step A. That discussion of likely and what the city and what the people of the city want to see their city grow as, and how they want to see it grow. That's discussions B through F. And then the final result will, of course, be the comprehensive plan updates themselves that each city has to do. So, and just as a quick aside, so when the report says there's 33,000 units worth of physical capacity in the city of Spokane, Nothing is saying that that's going to happen in 20 years. No one is believing that it's going to be 33,000 units. That would be 3,000 permits, or that would be 1,500 to 2,000 permits a year for us. That would be a lot of units. It's just saying that that's physically available if those landowners want to develop.
Okay. So if all of the land gets counted right now, saying that even though you recognize, I guess here's where my brain is at. We're looking at what's likely to be developed in the next 20 years, but you and I both, like, I appreciate you calling out and saying that, like, it's there, but the likelihood of all of that getting developed in the next 20 years is not likely. So if it gets counted at this point, how does that impact? And I live in the city of Spokane, so that's partially what I'm asking, is because I raise my kids here, and I see how tight it is. I hear the neighborhoods all really concerned about density. They like the idea for other people's neighborhoods, but not for their neighborhood. And so if all of this gets counted, then what? Or that's in steps B through F that will get addressed down the road.
That's really where those decisions get made, is when the community comes together to rewrite and look at policy and alternatives. Keep in mind that so we have this table up and thank you, Scott and Graham, for leaving the table up. Those two columns you see on the right, the allocations, that's what the state tells us we must accommodate. We must expect those. The ones I'm talking about that are like the maximum physical that we could ever really reasonably expect to develop is that left side of the table. So when we have those conversations about where should density go, where should those adjustments be made, that's coming. That's not what the LCA is meant to answer. The LCA is meant to answer, do we need more space? So if you're a city, the LCA is meant to answer, should we either change our zoning to allow more density and more units? Or if we can't do that, or the city is unwilling to do that, do we need to look at expanding our boundaries? For the county, the discussion is, do we need to up our zoning to allow more units than we do now? Or do we need to expand the UGA? Those are the questions that we're trying to answer when everyone's doing this through GMA right now. The better questions, the more important questions to your family and my family, I live in the city too, is where is that going to go and how is that going to work? That's still coming. That's not what the LCA is meant to try to answer.
Hey, Scott, do we technically have till 10:30 or are we
Yes.
over our time? Okay.
No, we're fine.
Okay. Very
Okay.
good.
Sorry. You know me, I can talk. So I apologize if I'm taking too long.
I do wonder, would it make sense for us to set up a workshop outside of this to just answer those types of questions for folks that may have them? And I mean, it could be jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but maybe there's something more collaborative we could do.
If the steering committee wishes to do so, we will help facilitate it.
If there's a lot of questions, seems like it makes sense. Is there anybody else with their hand up?
Yes, we have Linnell Hott from the audience, and Jim Frank has asked to speak again.
Okay, we'll go to Linnell and then Jim real quick.
Thank you very much. This is a question and a comment regarding the population allocation. I appreciate that when you make these estimates, that you take into consideration public facilities and roads and all that sort of thing. And my interest is in how has conservation land or open space or migration corridors been considered in this allocation? Is now the time that I raise that, or is it later? The issue that I'm specifically sensitive to is when the last UGA was expanded, automatically places that some people thought were conservation land were actually zoned residential. And so the community has lost land that, for example, now is forested and it will not be forested in the future. And land that has been open space for a long time, the community is lost. So my interest is in preserving those because of fire, because of wildlife, and because of recreation. So So if you could address if that's been factored in, or how do you plan to factor it in the future? Thank you. I know
Mr.
it's not
Chair,
easy.
I could jump in quickly on that. All of those, and this is predominantly, directed at the county and in the edges, the unincorporated areas. The availability of lands in the analysis at this stage is based only on those that are currently zoned for urban development. This does not take into account anything other than that, and that's to provide an accurate window of potential capacity. If there is planned for expansion, yes, all of those factors will be taken into account. Notably, resiliency, a new element under GMA, and as certainly, we don't have to look very much in the rearview mirror to see the results of fire affecting areas of Spokane County, rural Spokane County. That open space preservation, rural preservation will all be a factor in any future recommendations to expand a UGA boundary. But it's premature to do that now, and it's not a factor in what's on the screen.
Thank you, Linnell. Jim, you want to go?
New message, Wednesday, 10:10.
Oh. Jim, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, can somebody needs to mute. I don't know who it is. Go ahead, Jim. Did we lose him?
Well,
Sorry, I was muted. I apologize.
Go ahead.
My understanding of the land capacity analysis is that we're trying to determine land that will be reasonably available for development during that 20-year period. Reasonably available for development, not potentially available for development or theoretically available for development. And so that's where issues come into play about, is the land, are there infrastructure gaps, for example, that prevent that land from being developed? Are there, in the case of underutilized land, can you really expect that people will tear down houses and replace them with apartments and displace families? So these are all big numbers, and they have an enormous effect on whether that land is going to be reasonably available for development. And it's not potentially available for development, it's reasonably available for development. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Are there any other hands up?
There are none.
Okay, well, with that, we will move on to the HAPT update.
And Mr. Chairman, we will provide an update on this. Basically, Tate and Bongo on our staff will take you through this.
Yeah, I'll breeze through this real quick here. I previewed this last, I can't remember the date, last November or whatever it may have been. PTAC has been working, and I'll shout out Kevin Freibaugh specifically, who did the lion's share of the work on this. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Commerce informed us a few months ago that HAPT, that we should be using the housing share as the input in HAPT as opposed to the population share. Basically meaning, I'm going to make up numbers here. Let's say the city of Spokane has, it's slated to get 10% of the population allocation. It may end up getting 15% of the housing allocation just based on household size and all those sorts of different things. So we were informed of that by Commerce. And after discussing it with PTAC, it was that body's opinion that we should be using household share or housing share instead of population share. So essentially what we've done is create a methodology to get our population allocation and transform it into a housing allocation or a housing share. That's kind of the long and short of it. I do want to be brief because I don't want to keep you folks here too long, but I'm happy to take questions, and I know Kevin probably is as well.
Okay, is there any questions on this or?
Nothing from the public. Oh wait, Joel. Joel has joined us.
Is Joel's hand up?
Yes.
Okay. Take it away, Joel. Joel, can you hear us?
Trying to get him on board here.
Okay.
Joel, can you unmute yourself?
Joel is still in the attendees column. I believe he needs to be promoted to a panelist.
Yeah, we see him that we've been trying that kind of repeatedly here. I'm sorry. If nothing else, we can have him comment, I believe, though.
In the chat, you mean?
Yeah. Well, we have been promoting him, but it's either he's not coming over or that. And Joel, if you can hear us, can you unmute yourself as a member of the public? Sorry, we're definitely having some trouble bringing him in here.
Okay, well, I don't know, maybe he wants to exit out and come back in. I don't know if that'd make a difference.
And Mr. White, I'm certainly happy to meet with you later if the technical difficulties aren't able to be worked out. I'm sure Kevin will be as well. So we're going to be available in the future as well.
Joel, if you want to just try kind of popping off and popping back in.
I think I'm in.
Oh, hey, there we go. Go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. I'm driving. So I'm just checking on, so how does that impact the population allocation based on your, the PTAC's work? Are we gonna see more population assigned to the cities? Or what is the estimate right now?
So I'll say two things real quickly, and then I'll kick it over to Kevin if he wants to speak to it more. Everyone's housing allocation changes slightly with this. I don't remember all of the numbers offhand. They all changed slightly. We are expecting to do an adjustment of the population allocation informed by the LCAs and that sort of thing. So it's going to change the population allocation, and then we're going to, sorry, I'm trying not to get too into the weeds. Essentially, everyone is going to have slightly different numbers than what you have seen before. We are not positive what they are yet.
Do we know when we will know?
Sorry, say that again, please.
When will we have those numbers?
Actually, I believe we'll get more into that in the next portion of the agenda, which I slipped my mind. I apologize, on the regional calendar. But Kevin, sorry, I think you had something you wanted to add.
I was just going to say, when we talk about different inputs, the one thing that's not changing in the HAPT is the total number of houses in the county. So this kind of an adjustment to more closely align with what the HAPT is intended to be given, it means some cities, some areas will go higher and some areas will go lower. The overall number of houses in the county doesn't change. So for instance, if you look at the memo that was included in the agenda packet on page 4, there's a handy table that tells you which ones go up and which ones go down. The city of Spokane, our allocation went up quite a bit, but some cities went down. Liberty Lake went down by about 1,500. So it's not a simple thing in HAPT. When you change one thing, it changes other things in funny ways. It's a very complex tool. So that's why we included table 2. It's on page 4 of the agenda, or page 4 of the memo in the agenda.
Does that answer the question, Joel? Well, hopefully that gets to the question.
Yeah,
if not,
we might have lost.
Just don't get in let's hope he doesn't get in a car accident trying
That's
to go off of mute. That'd be good.
Okay, well, why don't we get to our last here, the timeline?
Mr. Chairman, we'll go through this pretty quickly. You can see a couple of bases here. The LCA reports, we're hoping to wrap those up in the next month for presentation to the steering committee and our constituent commissioners and councils before the March meeting. And then, as Bongo was talking about, that round 2 of allocations also would be something that would come back for the March meeting itself, and that would hopefully address Joel's concern as well. The other major impacts that overlap in some cases with our constituent partners, but the county, like the city, is updating its EIS. Same issue. It's more than 20 years old. It does no longer function as well. And so we'll be going through a schedule of scenario building and working through that. We will also coordinate that with our major cities as we're going. Both that and then as our comprehensive plan. And what we're starting that actually today, this afternoon, we're doing a virtual work session on placemaking and resiliency, specifically to look at neighborhood planning in the unincorporated UGAs in a different way than in the past, which has simply been the separation zoning of single family traditional or LDR, MDR, HDR. That's going to then have 3 public forums, one up in the Mead area, one on the West Plains, one in the East Valley, that center place that the Valley is hosting for us. And then you can see the other actual things going on. We're starting our policy audits, and we'll be working through those draft goals and objectives for the rest of the year. The important part of policy audits and others is, as we know, the new elements, the housing allocation that you've heard a lot about is much more complicated. We also have the climate and resiliency element, and many of the members on this commission and Mickey's group in representing others, a lot of the smaller cities and towns have partnered with the county to work through that climate and resiliency element. So we'll be also working with all of those partners as we move this forward. Mr. Chairman, that's all we've got. If there are any questions about process or questions, we can take them here, or people are welcome to contact us through me anytime.
Okay, yep. Any quick questions related to the timeline and schedule there? I am not seeing anybody. Anything else that's just for the good of the order that needs to be shared? Also not seeing anybody. Okay. Well, with that, we can adjourn our steering committee, and I guess we are back on March, and we don't have a date yet, correct, or a location yet, but it's March 19, correct?
That's correct. We are optimistic that we'll be back face to face by then, or at least the opportunity.
Hopefully so. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you.